Please exit the video now as your mental health is priority. If you are a true crime lover like myself, I invite you to stay as we learn about another true crime case. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We are going to talk about another killer kid on this video. This was a case that left police in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, just baffled. On the night of May 12th of 2007, someone entered a suburban residence at 85 Beach Lane in Manheim Township and slaughtered 3 members of the Haines family. The 3 members of the family that were murdered were Thomas Haines, 50 years old, his wife, Lisa Ann Haines, 37 years old, and their 16-year-old son, Kevin Haines. And they were found stabbed to death in their beds. Only their daughter, Maggie, who happened to be home from college that weekend, escaped this brutal carnage. Fortunately, Maggie managed to sneak out of the house and run to a neighbor's home. And from there, she called 911. By the time that the police arrived, 12 minutes later, the killer was long gone. People have gone on to speculate if things would have been different had the police arrived sooner. Upon arrival from the police, they found Thomas and Lisa Ann Haines in their blood-spattered bedroom, savagely stabbed to death. Kevin was lying in the hallway just outside of his bedroom, also stabbed to death. He had put up a valiant fight for his life, sustaining several deep cuts to his hands and arms as he tried to fight off his attacker. In doing this, he sustained over 20 knife wounds and also had his throat slashed. However, his brave attempt to fight back was not in vain, man to her parents' room, where she found him sprawled across the bed and her mother sitting upright against the headboard. At that point, Lisa Ann Haines was not actually dead, but she was very badly hurt. Lisa managed to whisper to her daughter that she should get out of the house and go get help, and that was when Maggie made a run for it, because Maggie was able to swiftly get out of the house. She never saw the attacker, and so she was unable to provide the police with a description. But there were clues in the house. There were bloody footprints that crisscrossed the floor, running from the master's suite to an upstairs bathroom where the killer had likely gone to wash up and clean up a bit. The prints also tracked down the stairs and out through the back door. The question was, where had the killer gone after making his exit from the house? Police brought in a team of bloodhounds to assist the police answer that question. The dogs quickly picked up a scent and led their handlers down the hill towards Pennsylvania Route 501, and then north toward the parking lot of a fast food restaurant. However, at this point, the trail went cold, leading investigators to conclude that this was where the killer had parked his car before proceeding to the Haines residence on foot. It was then that he committed the murders before returning to his vehicle and driving away. Now, this was a decent theory, but it also came with a bunch of questions, most pertinently regarding motive. If the hypothesis that the police had come up with held true, then this was no random crime. Whoever had done this knew the Haines family, knew where they lived, and knew how to get into their house. And so they felt as though, in this case, the family had been deliberately targeted. But that did not make sense to anybody. Tom Haines and his family were the most unlikely people in the world to the police, but, in the community. For the sake of this story, in the community, to inspire someone to commit bloody murder. They were decidedly ordinary people. They were a happy family who kept a low profile, but overall were very well liked in their community. Tom worked as an industrial supplies salesman. His wife, Lisa Ann, was a nursery school teacher, and Kevin was a normal high school sophomore. And yet, someone had butchered them in a crime that seemed intensely personal. The dots were not connecting for the police. They didn't understand how a family who literally had no enemy in the world many options for safety as possible. However, out of nowhere, the case was suddenly resolved. Just a month later, on June 16th of 2007, a man named Timothy Kreider called the police and said that he knew the identity of the killer. He then offered up a suspect no one would have ever suspected: his 16-year-old son, Alec. According to Timothy Kreider, Alec had confessed the murders to him 2 days earlier. He had been mulling over the information since then before deciding that he had to do the right thing and give up his son. On the face of it, Alec Kreider made a very unlikely murder suspect. He was a 10th grade student at Mannheim Township High School, a member of the German club and of the school's quiz bowl team. He was a model student with a clear disciplinary record. So with all of that said, he had never given the police any reason to suspect him. Until now. Now he was confessing to a brutal triple homicide, and there's plenty of evidence to back it up. In Kreider's closet, the police uncovered a knife that would turn out to be the murder weapon, shoes that matched the bloody imprints found at the crime scene, and items of clothing spattered with the blood of all 3 victims. And this was more than enough to arrest Alec Kreider and to charge him. So we know that the evidence pieces the puzzle together of who did it. But the question that remains is why? Why had Alec, exemplary student and all-around fairly regular guy, suddenly decide to try his hand at murder? And unfortunately, that question has never been satisfactorily answered, although there was one cryptic clue. And it was hidden in Kreider's journal. He wrote in his journal that he despised happy people. Perhaps he had been jealous of Kevin Haines's contented home life, which he had witnessed firsthand on the occasions that he visited the Haines residence. Kreider never confirmed or denied the jealousy motive. His parents were divorced, and Alec lived with his mother. It is, in any case, the closest investigators ever got to uncovering the why of the murders. So clearly there is very minimal information that could support a theory of motive. Even though his parents were divorced and he lived with his mother, obviously we know how many children of divorce are out there, and they don't turn into brutal murderers. When police talked to Alec about the murder, he was very forthcoming when it came to describing how the murders had been committed. He shared that he had gone to the Haines residence that night with Somehow he had found himself in the master bedroom, and it was then, in that moment, that he had decided to kill Mr. and Mrs. Haines using a razor-sharp hunting knife that he had brought with him. Thomas Haines had died first, killed almost instantly by the knife wound straight into the heart. Then Alec moved on to Lisa Ann Haines, stabbing her several times in the abdomen before she could cry out. He then made his way over to his friend's room, where he killed Kevin in the hallway, inflicting a total of 25 wounds and slashing through the teenager's throat. The fact that Alec was so forthcoming with the details of the case and of his, at least of the physical violence portion, makes me feel like he was proud of it and had a level of satisfaction in getting to relive that through telling the story, which I feel like is not necessarily uncommon, but I think it just goes to show how mentally unstable this kid was. In some of the research I did, I read that Alec did have very serious anger issues and had brought up suicide from time to time. It wasn't really talked about more than that, unfortunately. And like I said, the motive is still very unclear. But I think everybody can agree that this teenager was very, very unwell mentally. In the middle of 2008, Alec Kreider went on trial for 3 counts of first-degree murder. With the confession that he provided, backed up by all of the very significant forensic and DNA evidence, he had very little option but to plead guilty and accept the consequences of his actions. Those consequences amounted to 3 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. Now, life without parole is said to be a very harsh sentence to impose on a teenager. We know that sometimes teenagers are treated with more leniency in the court system, or at least have the possibility of parole down the line if they show that they can be a functioning member of society. Because when they're teenagers, their lives have barely just begun. But in Alec's case, upon conviction, he was looking at the possibility of 7 decades, perhaps even longer, behind bars. In 2012, however, the United States Supreme Court ruled that mandatory sentences of life without parole were unconstitutional. wanted to provide some information about Maggie Haines, who was the 20-year-old daughter in the family and the only survivor of this brutal attack. As mentioned early on in the video, Maggie was home for that weekend from college visiting her family. She ended up preparing a 10-minute videotape that was played in court during trial about Kreider's actions and how that crime destroyed her family and how it greatly impacted her. I will link the video in the description box if you're interested in watching it, but I will summarize it for you. She basically shares that she doesn't know how to function without her mother and father, and without her younger brother. She expressed feeling a sense of guilt, of survivor's guilt, that she made it out alive and wasn't able to at least protect her brother. She said that big sisters are supposed to protect their younger brother, but she wasn't able to do something. She said she felt that sense of guilt, and she would have given anything for him to be alive instead of her. She expressed that ever since the attack, she really struggles with PTSD and has trouble sleeping at night, which is extremely understandable. She talks about her grief process and that she is in touch with a therapist that she works with, but talks about how this kind of grief and going through a tragic and traumatic event of this scale is very isolating for her, because not many people can identify and relate to what she went through. She said that her friends at college were very supportive of her emotionally, but she felt it was hard to connect with them because they never knew her family. On the flip side of that, she said her brother's friends knew her brother very well, and so it was comforting to talk to his friends, but they also really didn't know their parents very well. And so her point with this is that whenever she would go to talk to somebody about her family and this loss, there really wasn't anybody in her life that knew her mom, her dad, and brother on a deep level, which for her made healing very hard. Alex's father certainly did the right thing, and I would argue was an incredibly hard decision to make, knowing that your child is a murderer, and a murderer times 3 at that. I imagine that there would be many a family that would help cover the tracks. It made me think of the Gabby Petito murder, where Brian Landry's family really was not all that forthcoming and supportive of police in the investigation. So the fact that Alex's father came forward and gave up his son is not only an excruciatingly painful decision, but it is so admirable. Alex's father went on to write a book about his experience, and basically the book is about how not to get weighed down by such a tragic event and to not let that define you. His father, Tim, authored the book Refuse to Drown, and in the book it does summarize how Manheim Township in Pennsylvania was rocked by this triple homicide during the summer of 2007. It shares that there were no witnesses, very few leads, and no solid suspects until Tim Kreider came forward and shared that it was his son who committed the murders. Refuse to Drown is the true story of a father's despair and the type of perseverance that can lead to hope and daring. I really find this respectable too. When looking at the book online, the About the Author section says Tim Kreider is passionate about helping people find healing and wholeness. He started a non-profit organization called Also Me that encourages people not to live life alone, which I think is encompassing the fact that his son struggled with mental health. So overall, I think that Tim really made the best of a bad situation, and as mentioned earlier in the video, there was speculation that his home life wasn't as stable, which could have prompted some kind of jealousy motive, but based on what we see from Tim, it seems like he was a really solid